know, you said 12-minute chunks. What did you save it and?
It records a file, and the file can only be 12 minutes long, and then you just have to start it and stop it again.
Yeah, okay.
And it gives you an opportunity to stretch your arms.
Yes.
Yeah, it must be exhausting.
Yes, I'm saying something right now. Okay, good. Very meta.
I'm rolling again. Me too. Rolling.
I guess I'll start this on. Hello, Roddy Doyle.
Hello.
I'm sorry to mess with your theme of your new book, 2 Pints. I'm not really a beer drinker.
No, nor am I at this time of day.
Oh, really? Okay, good. So we're on a level plateau.
We are, yeah.
Maybe something with milk, I can make a mustache.
That's a bit hard to cope with, actually, seeing a grown man with a milk mustache.
Want me to wipe it off?
No, you're grand.
Oh, okay, I'll keep it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get to your book.
Grand.
2 Pints
Yeah.
is basically 2 grown men having a conversation, a pint each in a pub, and the dialogue happens over the course of several months. Why did you decide to do it this way? How did it come about?
I opened a Facebook account. I'm writing a novel, and the main character in the novel needed Facebook. So I was asking my older children.
And this is a different novel.
Yeah. That's not a novel. This is just a book. No,
Okay.
The novel, my literature. The character needed a Facebook account, and I was asking my older children, who are in their 20s, about it, and they were kind of politely pushing me away, and so I just opened up my own account.
Did they not want you to see their own accounts? Is that why?
They felt it was their territory, I suppose. To a degree, I agreed. So I opened an account, and kind of began to enjoy it to a degree. I'd home in it every couple of days. And I used to be a high school teacher, and I found ex-students of mine wanting to become friends, and then writers wanting to become friends, and I asked for writers to become friends with me, and then started reading articles. I was away for a while, and I found as a way to fill the occasional hour in a hotel room, it was really quite pleasant. I was wondering, well, what can I do? Besides sometimes going to YouTube and finding an old piece of music from 1977 and putting it up there and saying that's real music, that type of thing, boring, old man stuff.
So you wanted to find a way to be more engaged.
Yeah, to put in something, it was May of last year, the Queen of England. I think she's also the Queen of Canada, if I'm not mistaken.
She's on our money, I think.
Yeah. She was in Dublin or Ireland for about 3 days. And she just left, and Obama dropped in.
For a visit.
And he stayed less than 24 hours. But it was amazing. It was great because the country's in a bad way at the moment. And it was a bit of a party. It was great. The Queen's visit was extraordinary. It's the first time the monarch had visited since we broke away in 1922. And very significant, and a lot of symbolism, and a lot of really well choreographed stuff. So it was actually, a lot of people were very, very moved really by it. And then Obama arrived, and that was hilarious, claiming his Irish roots. And we were delighted that he has, admitted that he is that. The O isn't an African O, it's actually an Irish O. There's an apostrophe, so it's Obama. And so I don't know why exactly, but I visualised these 2 men of my own age, middle-aged men, sitting at a bar, talking about it. So that's the very first one. And I then went to Google Images and found an image of 2 pints of Guinness. Right. And I just put up the photograph with the dialogue and sat back and see what happens. And the reaction to it was terrific, A lot of people enjoyed it, and there was a lot of sharing of it, and then commentary on it. And so about a week later, I thought, well, here's another one, and I put that one up. So it became a bit of a habit. Quite often, I decided very early I'd limit it to 200 words.
Now, why such a capper?
What?
Why such a capper on it? Why such a limit?
It just seemed like a good idea to extend it any more. First of all, it would be difficult, I think. It would have to be some sort of a PDF or something if it was too long.
Okay.
And also, I didn't want it to be too long. I thought short, brief visits to these men was the way to go. And then people were always saying, you should write a play about these 2 guys. And I thought, no, it'd be dreadful. It'd be really tedious. So keep it short and snappy. And it was a good exercise for me as well. I quite enjoy, if I write something at 300 words, I always enjoy cutting it down to 200. There's a precision to it, and I think generally the work gets better. And as well, I didn't want to spend too much time doing it either because I had other work to do. But quite often, I walk a lot when I'm, in Dublin when I'm going from A to B. And I might be walking from one place home, and I'd have the thing composed in my head when I got home, and I'd then write it out, and then give it the editorial snap and make it the 200 words or less, and then put it up on Facebook. So I did it for about a year and a half. And a poetry publisher in London suggested it as a book, and I was quite taken aback, and he said he'd love to publish it as a poetry book almost, because of the rhythm of the dialogue. And I decided always it was just dialogue. There were no descriptions and no third parties. There was just the two lads in the pub. And if there were other people in the pub, now and again they draw attention to the other people. But it's a closed world, a closed and nobody else was going to get into it.
See, I always envisioned you actually, going into a pub and, taking notes. I mean, the dialogue is so true, and you'd be taking these, you'd be hiding underneath and taking these two men talking on.
That the myth that I go around recording people's conversations won't go away. Like somebody said when I wrote The Snapper, this book about a young girl who's pregnant, and somebody said I recorded the conversations of the young women in the novel, and they never thought about how would I do that. I wander the pubs of Dublin waiting till I heard a conversation about one of them being pregnant, and I thought, at last, after 37 years, I finally come across the right conversation. No, I just make it up.
Okay.
If I go to a pub, and I do occasionally in Dublin, it's not to take notes. It's quite the opposite. It's like to enjoy myself,
You're letting go.
The rhythm, I suppose the rhythm of the language is more important really than the content of the language. And as to the rhythm, that's where it becomes, I think, real a bit. You can hear it. I would like to think you can hear the guys talking. But that's because that's what I do.
Right.
I've grown up listening to the rhythm of that language. My closest friends use the rhythm of that language. And so it's not automatic because it takes work, just rejection or acceptance of a word or a phrase, but it's, and they're deliberately kind of middle-aged men, as am I. So I don't have to delve too deeply. I don't have to look up, Google middle-aged Dublin men. There may well be a Wikipedia page that will explain what a middle-aged Dublin man is. So I don't have to dig too deep. So no, I don't do any research whatsoever.
But it's very in the moment, though. I mean, it's...
quite deliberately. And I'd imagine a few, and sometimes very parochial, very Irish. There was an Irish presidential election, for example, and I didn't follow it as such. Well, I would because I was going to vote, but I didn't. The two men didn't follow it necessarily. But I didn't say to myself when I was writing it, well, people in Canada or the United States or the UK or wherever I have, Facebook friends, they're not going to understand this. I just wrote it as if this was a conversation between two men.
In a pub in Dublin.
In a pub in Dublin, yeah. So sometimes they react to international events like Gaddafi or the death of Whitney Houston, or other times it's more local. But,
and you even got the horrible massacre in Oslo as well. And
yeah, because it coincided, I think, quite sadly with the death of Amy Winehouse, and somehow or other, conversations do swerve. So they joined the two things together. It was just, from their point of view, a pretty wretched week,
And everything's got a date on the top of each segment.
That was as much, with my... when this poetry publisher suggested it, I said, well, I'll need to show it to my regular publisher, Dan Franklin at Jonathan Cape in London. And he was very giddy about it. So it's actually a Jonathan Cape book. He did it. And at first, I wrote out some headlines just to remind people what had occurred that inspired this, but they were awful. They were really totally unnecessary.
Just so blunt, and were they just too
blunt? And it's as if, a little bit of I suppose a little bit of the fun in the reading, I would hope, was that people will remember the event, maybe halfway through reading the page. Oh yeah, that happened then. That's why they're talking this way. Sometimes it's obvious, like the death of Donna Summer or the death of not Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones from the Monkees.
Rest his soul.
So there's a whole rock and roll obituary section almost.
But you must have had something. Did you have something in mind, like any specific guys that you'd see in the pub?
Just two men, and after a while... the two men was enough, just these two men sitting beside each other. I decided that they weren't particularly close friends. These weren't lifetime buddies who'd known each other, who grew up together. They were just guys who actually found a natural home beside each other for a couple of times a week maybe. Not even every night, but a couple of times a week. Share a couple of pints and their kind of sceptical view of the world. And they pretend in a way that they're thick, but actually they're quite sharp when needs be, and deliberately lull each other into kind of the traps of ignorance, and then they know a little bit more than they pretend, and they have fun in this way. And So quite quickly they became, I suppose if I was to visualise them, they'd both be bald and both wear glasses and both be about 5'10" and wear plaid shirts and drink Guinness.
That sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, so like the dialogues are actually probably monologues.
Now, would you, when you were writing these, would you actually? I could envision you typing away, yelling in different voices.
No,
You'd never talk aloud when you write.
No.
Not even a mutter, a grunt.
Not that I'm aware of, and if I heard myself muttering, I'd be disturbed. No, I never do that. I've heard of, I know, a great Irish writer, Kevin Barry, who stands up and walks around and recites what he's doing. The two of us were doing an interview together about the way we approach our work, and he was talking about he stands up and he walks, having written the thing or having experimented with it, he stands up and he walks around the room reciting it out loud. Yeah. But, and somebody, I can't remember, somebody else said, oh yeah, I do that too, but no, I never do that. I just sit and I look at the page. I never actually recite anything out loud at all.
That astounds me because it's so rhythmic, and
it's in my head.
And I see these voices.
Yeah,
I could
I suppose in a way, the way sometimes you're consciously listening to music and it's in the room, and other times you're wandering around the street and the music is in your head, and it's almost as precise as if you were listening to it, but you're not. It's there. It's part of the soup of your, So you don't. Sometimes you reach a point where you don't need to hear the song anymore because it's there in your head. And now, I suppose the rhythm is there in my head.
Is it so intuitive that, like, I imagine that each character, each of the two fellas has a distinctive voice. Is it so intuitive that it goes even beyond having the distinctive voices in your head? Is it just so second nature?
No, it's not intuitive. No, it takes work. I put down a sentence and then I look at it and I might reject a syllable or whatever. But usually I'll build it and just see if it knits together, if it flows nicely. If one thing leads on to another thing, it'll be asking a lot of two real people to condense a conversation into 200 words and to not trip up, so to speak, and to be reasonably clear about what they're saying. So actually fitting it on the page in a way that kind of the eye drops down to the next line, drops down to the next line, and without being too worried about who says what, that there's still a sense that there are two people talking. So it takes visual work, so to speak, and it takes now and again I'd read over a line and it trips up, there's something wrong. And it's in a normal conversation it wouldn't matter. But there's a word in there that actually, it's almost, I suppose, like writing poetry perhaps. I've never done, but I'd imagine it's quite similar. So I take out that word and try to think of another way of constructing the sentence that still seems real. So in a way it is about construction. So there's nothing intuitive about it.
Right. I guess when I said intuitive, I was more thinking the sound of their voices, more about the vocal quality.
They say what I want them to say.
Yeah. Could I have another sip of milk?
Far away.
Roddy, thank you for coming on Pagelicker.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Right.
Thank you.
Do you dare me to finish this?
I couldn't care less whether you finish it or not. No, I'm not emotionally involved with your drinking milk at all.
I feel no connection to the milk whatsoever.
It's in you. It's in you. It's in you. It's like